Lyle McClung Jr., and Robert goes by Bob. And Bob is a Navy veteran of World War II and then also saw service in Korea. And we're filming this at 5103 Park Vista Way in Carmichael, California. And today's date is August 28, 2004. So, Bob, take us back before the war, before World War II, and tell us a little bit about your family, who was in your family, where'd you grow up, that sort of thing. Just lead us through the story.
Well, I was born on July 4th of 1924, and I'm my father's only child. However, my mother has been previously married, and she had 3 other children, so I had 2 half-sisters and a half-brother. Half-brother turned out to be a career Navy man. Maybe that's what steered me towards the Navy. Nevertheless, my parents were divorced when I was a very, very young boy, and subsequently my mother moved us to Los Angeles, where I grew up quite a bit. Went to junior high school, a year of high school. I wasn't too happy in Los Angeles, and eventually I returned to Denver, Colorado, where I was born, and lived with my father. Went to high school there, experienced the Depression, like a lot of other people my age have done. I was a very unsettled person, and my dad finally decided I needed a mother, so he married a lady who turned out to be a jewel of a mother to me. And eventually I got a little bit unhappy, and I quit high school in my senior year. Only had about 4 or 5 months left to go, but I went back down to Los Angeles and got a job.
Why did you quit?
I was just unhappy with school. I was doing all right in school. There was no problem about that. But I guess it came down to my dad wouldn't let me have a car, even though I had the money to buy it myself. So I said, okay. And so I went to Los Angeles and I bought myself a car. Anyway, I didn't live with my mother down there. I lived with my half-sister. And it was during that period of time that December 7th occurred. And as I recall, the day, Pearl Harbor Day, I was going to take my mother to dinners downtown Los Angeles to a restaurant we both like to go to. And, of course, we got the news about Pearl Harbor, and I was ready to go right down and enlist in the Navy right now. So my mother and I went down. We saw that long line standing there, and I said, no, I don't think I want to get in that long line. So as a result, we went ahead and had our dinner that day. And I continued working in Los Angeles for almost another year. And I went back to Denver, and because I was going to join the Navy, and I wanted to see my folks back in Denver. So I joined the Navy back in Denver, and left Denver on November 4th of 1942. I was sent to boot camps at San Diego Naval Training Station, and boot camp lasted for 8 weeks. lot of young men going through boot camps at that time.
What are your strongest memories of boot camp?
Well, there's several. First of all, the exercise every day. I've never exercised before, but now we get out and we're out there for 2 hours at a time doing exercises and marching. I enjoyed the boot camps pretty well. The only experience that I had that didn't set too well with me is this. They sent me to the dentist down there. And I didn't have a problem with my teeth. I had some little indentations in a couple of teeth. And the dentist said, well, this has got to be filled. Well, it didn't really have to be filled, but he needed to practice. And he hurt my mouth so bad. As I got up to leave, he said, don't you say thank you? I said, well, I mumbled it. Thank you. Started to walk out, and he called me to attention and said, you're supposed to say sir. And so I learned my lesson real well, quickly with the dentist. But that's beside the point. All right.
How was the food?
Food was great. I never had this problem with the food. I did find one thing kind of unusual is I went to junior high school in Los Angeles at Red Heart Junior High, and I met another classmate, and he and I became very, very good friends. And when we left high school, he went to one high school, or junior high school, he went to one high school, I went to another, so we got separated. Well, lo and behold, down here in San Diego, we're in boot camp together. He's in one company, boot company, and I'm in another, but we met. And so we ran around quite a bit after boot camp, and then we got separated again. And I'll come back to him because it's rather interesting the way it worked out. Anyway, after boot camp, I went to Class A machinist school for 16 weeks, and my dad was a machinist with the railroad back in Denver for many, many years. Now, I really wasn't that interested in it, but I'd had a background in working with the Shane, and so that's what they said I should do. I finished machinist school.
How did they, I'm sorry, this is really interesting to me. How did they actually teach you to be a machinist?
Well, first of all, you have all these machines. You have metal lathes, you have shapers, you have files. They teach you how to use all the hand tools which the machinists use. And one of the things that they teach you in machine work like that, very close tolerances. So you have to learn to really measure very, very, very precisely with this. Then you have a set of plants, and you put a piece of metal in a machine, and you start shaping it to what the plans call for.
Did they do a good job? I mean, it was a good course to study?
Oh, very good, very good.
I'm sorry, what happened after machinist school?
Well, we were sent to Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay for reassignment. And that was not a really nice place to go to if you were just a new person in the Navy, because all they wanted was people to do work of one kind or another. And most of the work was in the galley, washing dishes, cleaning house, and all that kind of stuff. But you're there saying you're waiting for reassignments. Well, there's a Oakland Naval Station, Naval Air Station, needed some help. So they called up to Treasure Island and they sent 30 of us down to Oakland Naval Air Station for 30 days of temporary duty. And somehow or other, that temporary duties turned into a lot longer than 30 days. Several months, as a matter of fact. And the policy in the Navy, I think in the Army too, if you're just sent somewhere on 30 days of temporary duty, your pay records don't follow you. So we never got saved for quite a long while down there. We complained about it, but they said, well, we're going to send you back to Treasure Island, you don't need to worry about it, so forth. Well, all they needed at Oakland Naval Air Station was people, bodies to do work, was it sign one kind or another and so forth, which is our necessary thing.
But not machine work, right?
No, I wasn't machining. The fact is, they put me to work in the galley. And they put me in a room with these big piles of sacks of potatoes, and here's this machine bolted to the floor in the middle of the room. They said, you can peel potatoes. So all I had to do is dump the potatoes in the machine, put the lid on, turn it on, and a little while later you got all your potatoes. A little bit smaller, but you had peeled potatoes. Well, golly, somebody took notice of that in the galley, and they said, you're doing such a good job, we're going to let you work in the other room where they make salads. So I went in the other room and I started making salads. And first thing I know, the head cook comes to me and says, you know, you like to do this work, why don't you become a cook? I said, sounds good to me. He said, all you have to do is go to the personnel officer and check out a couple of books, read them, take the test, and you pass the test and you'll become a cook. So I said, boy, that sounds like pretty good. So I checked out the books. They were so simple, they're so easy. So I passed the test, and one Saturday morning, they had a big lineup out on the car mast in front of the hangar, and they called Robert McClung up and said, you are now a first-class cook. I think it's great. So I went back and I started cooking in the kitchen. And I guess it was long about that time, somebody finally took notice of the fact that we were on temporary duty and we weren't supposed to be there. And we hadn't been paid. And so things started working in the personnel office. The personnel officer called me up and said, well, we're sorry, but you can't be a cook. I said, but I am. He just made me a cook. He said, well, you went to Class A machinist school, so you have to be a machinist. You can't be a cook. So they took my third class cook away and put me down in the machine shop in the hangar.
Still at Oakland Naval Air Station.
Right. And before I could get started on doing much of anything in the machine shop down there, they transferred us back to Treasure Islands, where I stayed for probably about 2 weeks. And that was when I was assigned to the USS Tulagi escort carriers 72. Finally got a shift, and a bunch of us went up to Bremerton, Washington for pre-commissioning school because it was a brand new ship. And we were going to put it into commission in Astoria, Oregon. Well, we were in pre-commissioning school for, month and a half, right around there. And then we went down to Bremerton, or Astoria, Oregon, and the ship was tied up at the docks, and we reported to the ship. And 21 days it took us to prepare the ship for sea. Now, to get back to this friend of mine that I met, my friend is in junior high school, and I met again at boot camp. I was on Liberty one night in Astoria, Oregon, and who do I come across but my young friend? It was like, fate was putting us together. Well,
What was he doing in Astoria?
Well, he had been assigned to the next carrier. Mine was the CVE 72, and he got assigned to the CVE 73, which was the Gambier Bay. And they were doing the same thing with this. They were putting it in position.
What was your friend's name?
Durwood Griffiths. And I've got a picture of his of the us there on the wall and show you a little more. Well, the 73 was a few days behind us, so we went to sea, and I never did see him again. But we went to sea, and we went up to Puget Sound, where we pulled into Seattle. We took on positions. They did several things with the ships while we were there, and generally getting the crews used to the ship just there. When they put one of these new ships into commission, probably 60% or more of the crew had never been on a ship before. So it's just a little while for all these people to get used to it, what they're supposed to be doing, and all the procedures and so forth. Anyway, we stayed up there for about 3 or 4 weeks, doing all these things, and then we sailed down to Alameda Naval Air Station in Oakland, or Alameda, in the San Francisco Bay Area, where we took on a load of airplanes. I don't believe I mentioned that the Tulagi, the CVE is Carrier Vessel Escort. In other words, they were an aircraft carrier. And originally they were designed mostly for just transferring airplanes from one place to another. But when they started building the Casablanca class of carriers, they made them so that they could operate as a regular aircraft carrier. They put all the equipment and everything on it. But on this particular trip, we just took on a load of airplanes and took them over to Honolulu, or Pearl Harbor. Well, just as soon as we got out of San Francisco Bay, headed towards Pearl Harbor, I got seasick. I've never been seasick before.
So all the way up Seattle, Puget Sound.
Never had any problems. But boy, when we left San Francisco, and it took us 7 days to get to Pearl Harbor. I sort of cared less whether I lived or died. And at that time, see, I was outclassed as a fireman, and they put me to work on the evaporators on board ship. I had to stand and watch on the evaporators. These are the devices on board ship that converts fresh water into, or seawater into fresh water. And there's too much to it. You just have to stand and you have to make sure that the things are working properly and so forth, but they sort of operate by themselves. Well, we got to Pearl Harbor, and I'll tell you, I was really happy to get inside of the harbor, because just like that, my seasickness went away.
So you were sick all the way across?
All the way across. It was terrible. It was really bad. I feel sorry for people who get seasick today, because I know where to find.
And they didn't have Dramamine, they didn't have that kind of stuff in those days?
Well, if they did have anything, they sure didn't. I went to the sick bay, but they didn't give me anything. But it's kind of interesting. I've been on the sea a lot since then, and been sick just a bit since. So it's good to get over that and forget about it. Our ship, for 2 years that I was on it, traveled 250,000 miles. Now that's a lot of time on the ocean, and I was really happy that I wasn't seasick anymore. Anyway, after Pearl Harbor, we came back to San Diego and went into the shipyard for some minor repairs. All these ships, things go wrong, and so on and so forth, or else they modify the chest or something. And so we spent a little time in the Naval Shipyard in San Diego.
Let me ask you a couple questions. Where was this ship built, do you know? Where was this Tulagi built?
Vancouver, Washington.
Up in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And
Kaiser built the ship.
Kaiser built everything.
Kaiser made an agreement with the government. He says, I can build 50 of these ships in 1 year. The government said, no, you can't do that. You can't build 50 aircraft carriers in 1 year. He said, it's timing. So they signed the contract, and he delivers. He built 50 of those things in 1 year. He delivered them.
What a story that must be.
Yeah, that was really something.
Do you remember what kind of planes you took to Honolulu, to Pearl Harbor, that first trip?
It's offhand, I don't, but I suspect they're all Navy planes. And most of the Navy planes at that time were the F-4F and the TBMs and the Zelsler side bombers. Now we didn't land or take off any airplanes on that particular trip.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted you in San Diego. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, we got orders to sail, and we were ordered to go to the East Coast. So we set sail and went down south. We went through the Panama Canal. That was quite an experience for a young person. For the first time. We got over into the Caribbean Sea, and before we went reported to Norfolk, we went on anti-submarine patrol in the Caribbean for 3 or 4 weeks. Germans had submarines in the Caribbean at the time, and that's one of the jobs of the escort carrier, was to do anti-submarine warfare work. So we got that practice. We went to Norfolk and went back in the Navy Yard for a little while. Then we sailed up to Staten Island, New York. I have no idea why we stopped at Staten Island, but I got a full day's liberty in New York City. Had a great time. First thing I wanted to do is Empire State Building. Had to see the Empire State Building. We went, there was a bunch of us to get it. Wound up the Jack Senstein's bar on 42nd Street. I was a little young, but they let me in.
You had all the right uniform.
Well, New York.
Yeah.
And what else did we do? We had quite a, what's the Radio City Music Hall? And that's where they were first demonstrating televisions. This is back in 1943. And we got to see ourselves on these little television screen. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Well, anyway, we left Staten Island and went to Rhode Island, Pontiff Point, Rhode Island, Naval Air Station. Fixed us a load of airplanes to take them over to Europe. Well, we got Liberty. What they do on board ships, maybe you're familiar. Were you in the Navy? Okay. On board ship, they divide the crew into port and starboard. Port and starboard. And port gets Liberty one day, starboard gets Liberty the next time. That kind of thing. And so I got Liberty one day, and we knew we were going someplace. We didn't know where, but we knew we were going someplace. So, coming back to the ship, I said, well, you know, we're going to be gone a while. I went to a liquor store and bought a bottle of liquor. And it was full enough that we were wearing our pea jacket. And big pocket. So I said, well, okay, I'll put it in my pocket of the pea jacket. And got off the bus, started walking through the main gate, and here's these Marines with these big long sticks. And they're tapping these sailors as they're coming in. And I hear this crash. I said, oh. I said, these guys ought to get this bottle. So I turned around, walked out across the street, dug a hole by a telephone pole, buried that sucker. I said, somebody, someday, is going to get a present. And so I went back to the base. Well, we left Pontiff Point, and we took this load of airplanes over, and we took them to Costa Blanca. Well, it just so happens that on the morning of June 6th of 1944, we were pulling into the port of Costa Blanca when they announced that D-Day had started. And I said, what in heaven's name are we doing down here? We ought to be up there. That's only a few hundred miles. But that's the way it goes. So we dropped off our airplane and kept our ears listening to the news about D-Day and the following day. And we took on some old airplanes, German and Italian airplanes that were bringing them back so that they could study them. And then we took on some German POWs. Well, it says, that's the enemy. Well, we set sail, we didn't know, so we came back to Pontiff Point, Rhode Island. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So, let's see what the enemy looked like. Well, they were in our bridge, down the bow of the ship. We had some Marines on board guarding the prisoners. So we snuck down. We wanted to see what the enemy looked like. Well, we got to look at him through the brig. I said, they don't know as much different we do. So we finally found out what the enemy was like. When you're on an aircraft carrier, you don't hardly see the enemy, except if he's in an airplane or another ship or something of that nature. Well, we went back to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and boy, I'll tell you, I went across the street and I dug up that bottle of booze, and we passed it around on the bus going into town on Liberty. Had a great time. They wanted to know where the heck I got that.
You were a hero.
Oh, Lordy.
Do you remember what it was?
Oh, it was bourbon. That was the only thing that I think I drank at that time, even though I was too young to. Trying to remember, we went from there back down to Norfolk, and we went into the shipyard again for some minor repairs, and then we headed. We took on a squadron of airplanes, which included some of the S4S that I talked about and the TBMs. And we headed back to Europe. This time we went into the Mediterranean Sea. We operated in the Mediterranean for, several months. And first we went to, first we went to Malta, the island of Malta. And this was our base of operation. This is an port. Or place where we operated out. Every time we went back into the port somewhere, before we would start another operation, we would go to Malta. But in the meantime, we went to Algiers, we went to Oran, we went to Alexandria, Egypt. And we had part of the royal family visit our ship while we were in Alexandria, Egypt. I was a fixer over there when I was in Alexandria. We were always very careful about what we did because German submarines were just all over the place from the Mediterranean at that time. And of course, our carrier wasn't the biggest carrier in the world, but any carrier is a good start as far as they're concerned. So we went back to Malta, and the next thing we knew, we were headed up to, and this was August of 1944, went up to, we took on an admiral. Admiral Durgan. Now, this became, our ships then, the Tulagi, became the flagship for the invasion of southern France. And Admiral Durgan was in charge of all the flight operations. There were 6 carriers involved, as well as some Air Force planes. And the invasion of southern France. And he coordinated the whole flight program for the invasion. I don't know how long we were there.
I've never heard about the invasion of southern France. Was it called something else?
Operation. Okay.
Where did they actually?
I've got it in one of my books here somewhere.
Where did they actually land?
You know where Toulon is? They didn't go near Marseille because it was too populated. But they went to the places where they thought was not as well guarded as Marseille was. So Toulon and that area on the coast of southern France, where most of the troops landed.
Now, were these mainly Army troops or Marines?
Yeah, they're Army.
Army troops.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then what happened?
Well, it's not students. I believe the 7th Army was landed just in southern France. And I want to say, well, I better not say it. Who the general was. I thought it was. Anyway, we carried out air operations for probably 2 weeks, supporting the troops. They really did a good job because the Germans, they may have known that we were coming, but they didn't have as many. They were fighting the front up around Normandy and that part of Europe, France. And so they didn't really have as many soldiers down in southern France as they should have had. But the invasion was a great success. The Army got established on beachhead and they started forward, and they never did stop. They just went up those river valleys so fast, and eventually they met up with the Third Army and the soldiers that were landed up in the northern part of France.
Now, has your job changed at all during this time? Are you still manning the evaporator?
No, as a matter of fact, yeah. Well, it seems like when I went to pre-commissioning school, they have my record. They said, "Well, he's graduated from machinist school, Class A machinist school, but we don't need machinists on board ship. We've got the machinists. We don't need any more. We're going to make you a water tender." I said, "What's the water tender?" "You got to work in the boiler rooms." So I got there. I got to stand watch on the evaporators maybe about 3 months, something like that. And then they said, "Well, we're gonna put you down in the boiler room." And that's where I stayed for the rest of the time on board ship.
Describe a boiler room. What's it like down there?
Hot. Average temperature is 120 degrees. It has these big round pipes that blow air in. You have to stand in front of them, or else if you get out away from that airflow, you can't stand the temperature for too long. But what you do in a boiler room on board ship, at least this kind of a ship, is that you have 2 big boilers in the fire room, and you have burners about this big in the side of the wall of the fire room, and they have nozzles that you pull in or out, and they have valves to turn the oil on, to turn it off. Depending upon what kind of speed the ships want the engine to go at, depends on how much steam they use. So that depends on how many. If they want more steam, then you put in more burners. If they want less steam, then you pull out the burners and shut them off.
And what were they using the steam for?
To operate the engine. We had reciprocating steam engines.
Oh, it wasn't as easy.
No.
It was a steamship.
Well, the engines, these reciprocating steam engines were a kind of engine they used on ferry boats going from Wisconsin to Michigan, on Lake Michigan. And they decided these would be good enough to power these carriers. And so, well, they weren't the best in the world, but that's what they used.
And it worked.
And it worked, but you see on the Great Lake, you don't have this big tossing and turning most of the time of the ship, of the ferry boat. On board ships, you're up and down and up and down and this way and that way, and all these cylinders in these engines, monsters. And they're just like automobile cylinders. They have rings, a series of rings on each piston. And as the pistons go up and down, the ship is going this way and that and so forth, these rings wear. A lot more than they did on the ferry boat. And so they discovered when they wear, they crack. So every once in a while they have to be replaced. So that's why the steam engines, the reciprocating steam engines, were not the perfect answer for an ocean-going vessel. But they were available, and this is what the Navy wanted, so that's what's tried to put in them. But then they use steam, just like a locomotive, railroad locomotive. They have systems that drives this on locomotives. It was a hot job in the boiler room. I didn't particularly like it, but and I told them, I said, I was told I was supposed to be a machinist. They said, well, we're going to make you water tender anyway. So I became a water tender. And eventually I got my petty officer's ratings. I was always happy to get off watch and get up. Almost always I'd go up on the bow of the ships, whether it was night or day, and I'd lay up there in the cool breeze.
And I guess no matter what time of day it was or how hot it was still cooler than downstairs.
Oh yeah. And then for a while I got a heat rash. It was like a reaction to a medication. That's this heat rash all over my body. Well, it was just the heat down the boiler heat. So the doctor had me take, they had it was like a tanning booth up the back of the ship. He had me go up there and lay under it for a little while, sort of twice, a month or so. And eventually it went away, thank goodness, because it was very irritating. But anyway, we're back here in southern France now, and we finished our operation. They didn't need the carriers anymore, so we reported back to Malta, and on the way we stopped at Corsica and Sardinia, and eventually we went back to Norfolk, Virginia. We really needed to go into the repairs, Navy shipyards, because they had a lot of things that needed to be done on the ship then. So we were there for about 2 months. At that time, I was now a petty officer, and they gave me a web belt, pair of leggings, and a nightstick that said, "You're going on short patrol."
Was there any worse duty than short patrol, or was that good duty?
Well, it depends on where they put you. In Norfolk, there were some bad places you really didn't want to go. But fortunately, I don't know why they put me out. I got to watch high school football game on shore patrol. So I thought, well, that's okay.
Hey, walk us through the ranks in the Navy, the enlisted rank. What do you start at? How many steps do you take before you get to petty officer?
Well, you have your seaman, second class seaman, first class seaman, and then you go to the petty officer, first class petty officers. If you're in the engineering department like we were, he's open a seaman to a fireman. If you're a fireman instead of a seaman, then you're second class fireman, then first class fireman, and then first class petty officer. Seaman, I get the impression is seaman's rankings are anything above deck, and firemen's anything below.
Oh, okay.
That kind of thing. If you're a machinist, supposed to be a machinist, why you start out as a fireman.
I'm sorry, we had you doing shore patrol during the North.
Patrol and Russell.
Yeah.
We eventually left Norfolk.
I just got started with it.
That's not tedious. We left Norfolk, went down through the Caribbean again, went back to the Panama Canal, reported to San Diego. We took on supplies and new shipmates, and we got assigned a new squadron, and we left for Pearl Harbor, and Pearl Harbor was just a refueling stop on the way to South Pacific. Out in the South Pacific, in the Marianas Islands, there's a place called Ulysses Atoll. Big monster of an atoll is like a big pond surrounded by coral reef. But this is miles wide. And there was only really one way in and one way out. And so ships could go in and anchor and basically worry about jacking a submarine. And of course, Ulysses was too far from any of their aircraft. So it was a safe harbor. And that's where most of your big task force were formed to go to these various places, like Saipan, Guam, so forth. So there were literally hundreds of ships anchored in Ulysses Atoll from time to time. And they form a task force of battleships and carriers and cruisers and destroyers and so forth. And they'd go out on a mission. They'd say they went to Saipan. It would be literally 2 days for all those ships to net. Successful to get out of that atoll. Fantastic. Well, we stayed there, and let's see, if I remember, just when we finally arrived, it was I think it was the first part of December of 1944 when we first arrived at Ulysses Atoll, West Point, Japan. And we had things to do on board ship. And one of the things that you have to do if you're working on boilers, is this oil goes in to the boiler, the firebox. And you have to adjust the airflow with the fuel flow, and it's when the burner sprays the oil, it's preheated and it sprays it in, and you have to have oxygen in there, so he has to adjust the air so that this oil burns exactly the right way. Well, sometimes if it doesn't burn right, well, you get smoke up the stack. And they don't like that because the enemy can see that for miles and miles. Or if it's not burning right, it forms carbon on the tube on the inside of the boiler. So that the water going through it takes more and more heat to turn the water in those tubes to steam. Well, they discovered that there are tubes in our boilers, or at least our one boiler anyway, had to be worked on. And the only way to do it is you have to climb into that boiler, that firebox, and you use these scrapers, metal scrapers, and scrape this carbon off of these tubes. Well, normally it takes at least a week or more to after you shut down a boiler for that firebox to screw off. And so, oh God, I think it was the Christmas Day of 1944. We had our Christmas dinner, nice dinner, everything you could have at home practically. And then they said, now we've got to go spring those tubes. And that was very unpleasant. Because after a full meal like that, you climb in that boiler spire box, it hadn't really had time to really cool completely. So it's hot. And then you have to scrape these tubes. And this spire box is higher than this room. And so you have to get a ladder, you're on a ladder, you're on a platform, and we're all scraping these tubes down. So that was an unpleasant experience. But
How big was the firebox dimensionally?
Well, let's see, it was probably, maybe about 3/4 of the size of this room here, and it went over maybe about halfway.
Like maybe 18 by 18, something like that? 18, 15?
It'd be more like about 20 by 18, something like that.
Okay.
Right, close to that.
Big.
So we got those tubes cleaned off, and that made the boiler more efficient in creating steam. Well, we got those all taken care of. Got the boiler all fixed up and ready to go, and then we were told we were going on a mission, and I don't know, there had to be 2 or 3 dozen of these carriers, these road carriers in Ulysses, and I don't know how many of them, but anyway, they formed a task force, and there were quite a number of our carriers. We headed out and we went over to the Philippines, and we went through the Mindanao Straits into the South China Sea, and headed north. Well, about that time, typhoon hit the South China Sea. Big typhoon. And I've got pictures of our carriers, our flight decks, they're like this, just unbelievable. They're not the best ships in the world to be in a typhoon on, because you're so buoyant, so you're just like corks. Anyway, we got
Your
up.
seasickness never came back even then?
Hmm?
Your seasickness never came back even in the typhoon?
Never came back. I was really happy about that. Well, for the most part, when you get into a storm like that, we kept all of our planes down on the hangar deck, down below. But in this particular case, we had one plane sitting right up on the starboard forward flight deck, right on the corner. And it was tied down pretty good. And there was a sailor in the cockpit, he was working on the avionics, the radio,
During the typhoon?
during the typhoon. And you could see the ship went down like this, and this big wave came up like this, and it just picked that airplane up just like it was a toy and carried it away. Never did see the plane or the sailor again. And so they had orders that never have a plane on the flight deck in the show like that. So anyways, we were headed for the invasion of Lingayen Gulf.
I'm sorry, what?
Lingayen Gulf, up north of Manila, in the Philippine Islands. Well, one of the things I discovered about these small carriers was that, especially the Costa Blanca class, was that, and they were designed this way, they could carry on air operations just like all the big carriers did. We could take off airplanes, we could land airplanes, we could repair airplanes, we could do everything the big carriers could do. We're not as big, we didn't have as many airplanes, but there's a lot more of us than there were the big carriers. And but the only problem, of course, is that we couldn't travel as fast as the big carriers. The big carriers could go 40 miles. I'm talking about miles now, not 40 miles an hour in the water.
And how fast could you guys go?
About 20, just about half their speed. So, the big carriers, then they could really go and move and carry on great operations. We could do the same thing once we got on station. So once we got into the Lingayen Gulf and started our air operations, we were doing the same thing the big carriers could do. That left the big carriers go out and do other things. So that helped. Forget how long we were at Lingayen Gulf. Most of the time in these invasions like this, where we supplied air supports and so forth, we weren't there for more than 3 weeks. Usually by that time, the invasion forces had established a beachhead and had a landing strip of some kind going. So after that, we went back to Ulysses.
I'm sorry, so during the invasion, in this case, you guys were a landing. You guys were
We were supporting
a base for airplanes flying in and attacking.
flying air supports and landing troops. We finished our operations there and went back to Ulysses Atoll. And let's see, that was January of 1945. Then comes February of 1945. February, March. Our next operation was at Iwo Jima, and we sailed us to Iwo Jima in a task force, and we supplied air support for the Marines that landed at Iwo Jima. There were probably about a dozen carriers at least in that operation. And we did the same thing we did at Lingayen Gulf. We just circled around, went here and there and so forth, and our air people took off and did their stuff and came back and landed and then took off again and kept doing that for I guess we were there for about 3 or 4 weeks.
Now, how far out were you from I mean, could you see Iwo, or were you far enough out that you were just seeing water?
Once in a while we could see the islands, but more often than not, well, 25, 50 miles off the island. It has to be too far. He didn't want to be too far because the closer you got in, the more time the pilots had over target because of fuel. Then we went to Guam from Iwo Jima, and during the period of time, we went on anti-submarine patrol for a while. Then we reported back to Ulysses Atoll. Then we made a few repairs of our own. I think we had to pull some pistons out of one of the engines to replace the ring. Normally this is done in a shipyard, but we didn't have a shipyard out there. So we did it ourselves. After they got the ship ready for sea again, while we was headed out in another task force, and we went to Okinawa. And we did the same thing in Okinawa that we did at Lingayen Gulf and Iwo Jima. We supplied air support for the Army troops that landed fighting the Japanese at Okinawa. The only difference there, of course, is that we were at sea for 83 days. No, 89 days. Almost 3 months we were at sea. And it was a long time. We never went into port. Now, there was a place, they did secure a place where we had to go to and get acid.
This is tape 2.
As I was saying, that we were at Okinawa, and we were at sea for 89 days. Longest time that we'd ever been at sea without going into port. However, we had a place they called Paramaribo that we went in for supply. And this one day we went into Paramaribo, dropped anchors. They put me on a working party to go to the ammunition ship and unload ammunition off the ammunition ship into boats to take it back to our ship. I worked there all day. And then we got our last load loaded onto the landing craft, headed back to the ship. During the day, there'd been a group of Japanese planes had been trying to get in because they knew a carrier was in there. And we were about halfway back to the ship, and here comes all these Japanese airplanes. They get in.
Did you see him?
Yeah, I'm standing on the landing craft has this thing with the cockpit in it. He's surrounded by metal, but he's steering the landing craft, and I'm going around this thing and I'm watching these Japanese planes that our gunners open up fire, and besides they can't get to us. So here's an LST over here, and so they went for it. And watched the sailors jump off because they're jumping off like ants off this LST, and there's one Japanese plane just comes in and just breaks the whole top of it and turns it on fire.
Now explain, an LST is not a small, like a landing craft. It's a big thing to land tanks.
Oh yeah.
It's a bigger ship.
It's a monster of a landing craft. Anyway, some of the planes we shot down and the others got away. But in the meantime, I'm looking over at my ships where we're headed for it, and it starts pulling up anchor and starts to move. I said, "You're not going to go without us." And so just like that, I saw us launch an aircraft. a fighter plane. It took off, turned left, banked left, went up behind the islands, went down behind the island, and came back up. And just as it came up, our gunners took aim and fired. They shot our old plane down. The pilot was lusty. He could start the plane going way up, and he bailed out, got his parachute open. He came back to the ship. I thought that was really justice. And I said to myself, I said, you know, and he flew off that ship again. I said, I never do that. I said, if you're gonna shoot people, you better make sure who you're shooting at. Anyway,
Now, who shot him down? Was it your ship that shot him
our
down?
gunner shot him down. Right.
Off the aircraft carrier he was
Right.
flying off of?
Right. Because
How could they do
he
that?
went down behind that island, and when he came back up, they thought he was one of the Japanese planes.
Were you watching him this whole time?
Yeah.
So you knew who he was.
I knew who he was, right.
But next thing I
And you know, these gunners, they say, they train and they train and they train on recognition, aircraft recognition. But they were shooting gun home. They wanted to shoot anything they could see. They thought he was going to come after them, so I can't blame them for that part of it. But, you know, the silhouette of an F-4F fighter is pretty distinctive. And they should have known. But anyway, I'm glad the pilot got out. And he came back, or he flew off of it again. Anyway, during the time we were at Okinawa, at one time they sent us out to do anti-submarine warfare. And when they do that, you're out there by yourself. You're not with a whole bunch of other carriers. You're there by yourself, but you've got your escort vessel. In this case, they were destroyer escorts. And five or six destroyer escorts surrounded. And it was during this time that Franklin Roosevelt died. Well, it just happens to be that the captain of one of these destroyer escorts was Franklin D. Roosevelt Jr. And they came up alongside. We had a plane ready for him to fly off, but he wouldn't. He said, his job was there. So he didn't start shooting.
with a guy.
Yeah. Well, after that, they decided, after our 89 days, they decided we'd had enough of it, so they sent us back to San Diego. And we got back to San Diego in around June 15th, or right around there. No, I guess it was around the end of June. And went into the naval shipyard in San Diego, and we had a lot of work that needed to be done. They put it in dry dock. Well, once again, they divided the crew into ports of starboard, and each group got 15 days leave. My 15 days was the second 15 days, and I went back to Denver and got married.
To who?
Oh, my gal down the street.
Had you been writing to her all
Oh,
this
yeah.
time?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So she was an existing girlfriend. You just didn't go looking for a woman to marry.
Yeah, no.
What was her name?
Her name was Jean, and she lived two doors down the street from us. And so we had our honeymoon, and then I had to report back to the ship, and she came back with me. I didn't want her to go to San Diego, but she wouldn't stay home, because I knew we were going to be sailing out again. Well, while we were back in San Diego, the war ended for the December 9th. So, but we still had another voyage to make. We were they started what they called Operation Magic Carpet. And this was the operation where they send ships out to various places in the world to bring back soldiers. And so we went to Samar in the Sultan, and we fixed up a whole load of soldiers. Our whole hangar deck was nothing but cot, nothing but cot.
What'd you do with the airplane?
We didn't have any airplanes on set. Now, there wasn't any need for an aircrew at that time. So we brought all these soldiers back to San Diego, and on the way back, we stopped for refueling at Pearl Harbor, and I went on Liberty, and so I came back to the ship, and I got really, really sick. And finally, I said, well, I better get to the sick bay. I went up to sick bay, and the doctor said, well, I don't want to, we need to take an x-ray of your lung. The only x-ray machine they had was a dental x-ray machine on board. And he took an x-ray of my lungs, and he said, you've got pneumonia. And he put me in bed, and I was in bed till we got back to San Diego, and then they carried me off, and I spent most of the ass in the hospital in San Diego, the Naval Hospital in San Diego. After that, I got discharged from the Navy on December 4th of 1945, and went back home. Well, left with my Navy career, pretty much.
What'd you do when you got home? What kind of work?
Well, at the time that I went back home, I didn't have anything that I didn't have a job. My new wife's folks had apartment houses, and they let us have an apartment if we managed one of the apartment houses, which we did. And they were automobile dealers. So my father-in-law said, well, all right, so you decide what you want to do. Why don't you come and we'll give you a job, and it won't pay that much, but it'll be something for you to do. So I worked there for a little while as a dealership. And during my schooling and so forth, I had taken drafting classes from 7th grade on up until I left high school. I could go out, I had enough skill, I could go out and I get a job as a draftsman. So I went to work for the Bureau of Reclamation as a draftsman. And I decided, well, I want to be an architect. So I started taking architectural courses at the University of Colorado in Denver. I took all the courses I could take. I took everything I could take, and finally they said, well, you can't take any more until you do the math. That's when I discovered I wasn't very good at math. Even though high school algebra, I got good grades. So that took care of my career as an architect. But I'd had a lot of experience now as designing houses, designing things, and drafting and so forth. So I was becoming pretty experienced. In the meantime, I decided to join the Naval Air Reserve that met in Denver. And it met at an airfield outside Denver. I started learning aerial photography. No more water tendering and stuff like that for me. So I was doing that, and there happened to be a National Guard unit that was meeting out there at the same time. My brother-in-law was in the National Guard unit, and he talked to me. He says, I forget, I was third class petty officer in the Naval Air Reserve. He says, why don't you come on over and listen to our program? He said, we could probably get you at least a couple of pay grades increase if you want to join it. So I did. I went over a list. I said, okay, it's the money. So I resigned, and I got discharged from the Naval Air Reserve, and I went over and joined the National Guard. Wrong thing to do. Our unit was the first unit to be called to active duty in Colorado in 1951.
What
Or
was your unit?
1960.
What was your unit's specialty? What did you guys do?
We built airfield construction work. So I became a construction foreman. And our job was to build airfield. So anyway, here I am. I'm activated now, and they sent us down to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, for training, and it's probably the worst winter of my life in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And meantime, now we've got a couple of children, and well, our goal was to build airfields, and they needed airfields over in Korea. So after our training in Missouri, they sent us out here to Camp Beale. You ever hear of Camp Beale?
I've heard of Beale Air Force Base.
Yeah, well, at that time it was Camp Beale because it belonged to the Army. As soon as we got out here, the Army turned it over to the Air Force, and it became Beale Air Force Base, and we were the first units to reopen it after the war. And it turned out to be nothing more than a staging area to go to Korea. So in November of 1951, we went to Korea. I was one of the advanced party, and we went over to Korea, and we made the base and the camp. We got the camp ready for the rest of the battalion to come over. And we started building airfield. Well, I didn't stay there too long because one of my compatriots had a gun, a rifle, that shouldn't have been loaded, but it was. And he said it discharged accidentally, but it got me in the foot. And so they sent me to the hospital in Tokyo, and I never did have to go back to Korea. So
What kind of a rifle was it? Was it a military?
Yeah, oh yeah, right.
Like an M1?
No, it was
Carbine?
carbine, yeah, carbine.
So how does it feel to get shot by a carbine?
Well, it's better than get shot by anything else, I guess.
Did it hurt immediately?
Oh, yeah.
Or was it numb? Or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think he was court-martialed for having a loaded rifle and not having safety on him and all that kind of stuff. But he said it was nasty. It probably was nasty. I don't think he shot me out person. Anyway, while I was recuperating in the hospital in Tokyo, Congress passed a law allowing people not because I was hurt, but because certain situations could get released from active duty. I said, I'm going home. So I went home. And when I reported back to the National Guard in Colorado, they said, well, you still got 2 years left on your time in the National Guard. You've got to report to duty. I said, no, I don't think so. They said, yeah, you got to. I said, no, you want me to report to duty, you're gonna have a couple of guys tell to get me. And so I never did report to duty anymore, and I got my honorable discharge from the National Guard over there.
Good for you.
Anyway, went back to Denver, couldn't get a job that I really liked, And so, my wife wanted to move anyway, so we moved out here to Sacramento. We had become acquainted with Sacramento during our time up at Camp Beale. And so I got a job drafting with Campbell Soup, and then with the Division of Highways, and then I decided, well, I finished college by now. I said, well, I graduated from the University of Denver. Guess I'll become a teacher. So I started taking classes at State College, became a teacher, and was a teacher and school administrator for 31 years. About the little before the middle of the 1960s, my wife decided she wanted a divorce, so we got a divorce. And I was single for a number of years, and then I met another lady, and we got married, and we had a pretty good life for about 8 or 9 years. Then she died. And gosh, I guess it was a year and a half later I met Judy here. And after that...
What year would that have been?
What was it? 1980, right? 80? Yeah, I think it was 80. And then we got married in 1981. We met in Sicily on a cruise ship. I was going there on a little visit, sandwich visit. That's just a kid.
Tell me what you were doing for the school district.
Pardon me?
Tell me what you were doing for the school district.
Well, I started my teaching career at Ford Elementary School, and I taught out there for 3 years. And then I went to another school district called Fern Bacon Junior High School. It was a Pacific School District. And at that time, all these little school districts had to align themselves with the larger school district. So they decided to go with Sacramento City. Pacific School District decided to go with Sacramento City School District. So now we're a part of the Sacramento City Unified School District. And I was a classroom teacher for, oh golly, 20 years, maybe around that, something like that. And then I became an administrator, and I was an administrator for the last 12 years of my career.
And then when you retired, what were you? What were you in the school district?
I was a dean, a junior high school dean, which means I handled all the discipline problems in the school. Couple of 3 years before I retired, they started transferring me to different schools. I went to Hiram Johnson's high school for a year, and then I was at West Campus of Hiram Johnson's for half a year, and then I went to Burbank Junior High School for a year. But the middle of that year, I decided to retire. And that was 1985. So it's 19 years out since I retired.
Well, what have you been doing in retirement?
As little as possible.
No, come on.
Well, let's see, we bought houses, we built houses. I learned how to build houses somewhere along the line in my life. And so we design a house, we build it, and then live in it for a while and go to another one and so forth. So I was living up by Colsack, the house that I died and built with my wife that died, and when I met Judy. Well, 50 miles up there, and it was long for me. And and she had her hairstyling business down here. So we said, well, let's do. We bought a piece of property in Rockland and put had a house put on it. And so that was sort of halfway between that. And finally, we sold the house up in Colfax, and we kept the one in Rostas for about 20 years. And then we went motorhoming. We bought a motorhome. Well, we've had a motorhome for almost 20 years, hasn't it? Colfax. But we bought a new one in 1994, and we decided that as long as we had our health and so forth, we'd get in the motorhome and go travel. So we put all of our furniture in storage. We leased the house in Rawson, and we traveled in the motorhome for 3.5 years. And we went, we've been up to Canada, Alaska, Mexico, back and forth across the country 3 or 4 times. So we've seen just about all there is to see. Well, we've seen a lot of places, but there's still a lot more to see.
Last 20 years she's in square dancing, which the doctor told you that you did.
We started square dancing about 20 years ago, and we're still at it. The fact is, we're going to the fair this afternoon with square dancing.
Within a group?
Yeah. We have we formed a club, square dance club, and there'll probably be about 7 or 8 couples there from us club.
It's good exercise and a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, catch it. We've square danced all over the world. Was in the Europe's in square dance. There's Asia in square dance. In fact, is 3 years ago. 4 of us, 4 couples of us went to China, and we danced on the Great Wall.
I'm beat darn.
Those people thought we were crazy.
I haven't heard of that before.
Those people thought we were crazy. And well, you take a tape, this tape player, and that's what he used in UP in college. Golly, let's see. Where else was it scored at?
New Zealand. We like to travel.
Shortest day of the year in 1996 up in Alaska at Fairbanks. We were square dancing out on the parking lot at midnight. It was still light. Those crazy things, but anyway, we like to do that.
Father had a heart condition, and he had the doctors say, keep doing what you're doing because you're repairing yourself. He has 2 complete blockages of main arteries, but the doctor says, you've already done your own bypass. And so he attributes that to the exercise to get attention.
Okay. Before we wind this up, I want to point out that we mentioned my friend Durwood Griffith. He was on the USS Gambier Bay. And October of 1944, there's a big naval battle took place just right off the Lake Ezo coast. And at that time, they had a lot of carriers there. We weren't there, but they had a lot of these baby carriers there, but they had a large number of big ships, like saddle ships and big carriers. Well, they thought everything was secured, and so all the big ships took off and they went up towards Japan. They left all the little carriers there, and about that time, a large Japanese flotilla came through the straits and came down and caught these little carriers unawares. And you see that picture up there, that's the Gambier Bay. It's the only small carrier that ever got into a running gun battle with a Japanese battleship. It didn't win, because they lost 300, about 300 men off of it, and it sunk. And I don't know whether he was on it at the time or not. I haven't been able to find out.
You never found Gerwood?
No. Now, I did find military cemetery outside of Phoenix. There's a Gerwood C. Griffith who was buried there, and I don't know how to go about finding out whether he's the person who I was friends with in junior high school or not.
But his family was from LA?
Yeah.
Study.
But anyways,
We'll get a shot of that.
good picture.
Is there anything, any goal left that you haven't accomplished yet? Anything left to be done?
Not really. I can't think of anything. I've done so much in my life. Just stay healthy and travel. We do a lot of travel. We've been all over the world. I've been to Russia 3 times, Soviet Union, well, parts of it was during the Soviet Union. We went to South America in February of this year. We're going to Boston next month. We're going on another cruise in October. So, like our biggest thing is travel now. We still have the motorhome. We came back from our 3.5 years of motorhoming because she had to have a knee operation. And couldn't do it in the motorhome. We can't get up and down the steps. And so we sold the house in Rockland and designed and built this house in 1999 and moved in a couple of days before 2000 here to that.
Now you turned 80.
Just turned 80.
So if you look back on 80 years of experience, what words of wisdom can you give us?
That's done.
You always say, when you're with to the end of your life, you don't want to look and see what you did not do. You want,
Well, yeah, I guess no regrets, but you're always going to have them. But no, I don't have any major goals. Any advice I would say is try to lead a reasonably clean life. You take care of your body when you're young. It's probably going to take care of you better when you're older. However, boy, in my Navy days, I was one heck of a drinker. I always say that if I stayed in the Navy for another year, I would have probably been a confirmed alcoholic. But, when I got married, I stopped all that, pretty much.
Thank goodness.
And take care of your friends. They serve the time of your life that's not as more important than anybody else.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your stories with us. And I also want to thank you for your service to your country during World War II in Korea. There are people out there who appreciate the heck out of that. And this has been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed coming over, and thank you again.
Well, thank you for having us done. Crews, and they call them plank owners. The rest of the carrier was all wood. So theoretically, anytime we wanted a piece of that wood, we could have it. This is me way back here.
Kind of peeking over the shoulder there.
Almost see me. Right, yep.
Yep. This is the Tulagi going in, what it looked like when it was commissioned. And who are these folks over here?
This is the Grand Harbor of Malta, and this is called the B Division. This is the division that operated the boilers on board
Oh.
ships.
And where are you in there?
And
Happy looking bunch of guys.
oh
off
yeah,
that ship, huh?
yeah.
And then there's your official notification that you're a plank
plank
member,
owner.
yeah,
Right.
plank owner on the Tulagi. And then we talked about Durwood,
And
and there's Bob on the left and Durwood on the right. Where was this taken?
no, that was down in San Diego somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, San Diego. Watch. I have the names of all these people, but I don't know all of them. But anyway, this is me. And that is the forward fire room on board ship. And Alexandria, Egypt.
Oh,
And there were 4 of us that went on Liberty, and we hired a somebody to take us around and show us some of the parts of Alexandria. When I reported,
start over.
huh?
Start over.
Turn it over.
No, start over.
Oh, this is my very first dog tag that was issued to me in boot camp in 1942 down in San Diego. And you'll never, not very too many people see these because it's rather unusual. It's got all my information, my name and so forth on it. But then on this is, and it's steel. And on the back is my thumbprints.
How'd they do that?
Etching, acid.
I'll be darned. No. And then Bob was telling us the story of the Gambia Bay being attacked off the Philippines. And here's an artist's rendition of before she went down. And Durwood may or may not have been on that ship.
Haven't heard.
Yeah.
Haven't heard. Me too.
I'm sorry, say that again?
This is boot camps in San Diego in 1942. And
You're just to the right of the crease?
right, this is right.
There you are.
All right. It's unbelievable how young you were at that time.
And then Bob told us about Korea, 1950 and 52. And here are, it's like Bob with an M1 that may have been bigger than him.
It looks like it. What was rather unusual about our company is that all of the non-commissioned officers, except one, were former Navy petty officers. And we all wanted to get back into the Navy.
I can imagine why. So you were a first sergeant, is that what that is?
I was sergeant first class.
Sergeant first class.
And 2 pictures up there are some of our equipment we're working on an airfield in Korea.
Uh-huh. And then who are the 2 folks in the photograph?
Oh, down below here?
And let me find myself.
Well,
There we go.
one is me.
That's you on the right
This is me.
with the KP sign?
Yeah, with the KP sign. Well, we're just playing around. And this was the sergeant in charge of our unit.
And then there are some official Army dog tags. Who was different looking in
Right.
1950 than
Right.
they.
Right. 1942.
So shortly after boot camp.
What were you, 19?
That? Like here is an adult.
You? How old? 18. 18 years old.
and ready for war.
No,
This is interesting. This is a ship's photo memory book from the Tulagi. And this is a picture of a plane being shot down. And the only thing it says in the album is that a VC-92 pilot is shot down, but escaped. Plane going straight down after the pilot bailed out. What they don't tell you is that it was shot down by gunners on the Tulagi. So they shot down their own plane. Here's a photograph of one of the small carriers during the typhoon. And this is kind of an odd photograph because there's two ships here. The one with the big mast on it is another carrier following one in front, but look at the angle of that.
it was January of 1945.
Crazy.
Our fire room, or forward fire room, and this was the after fire room on board our ship.
On watch on the fire room. To the shot of, I don't know what you call this, the brag board or something, that talk about the battles they fought, and notice that there are both Japanese and German renditions here.
We shot down 6 German planes in invasion of southern France. Got a couple of submarines.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all Japanese planes, just destroyed.
And then this is a photograph of a typical day at Ulithi Atoll. It's a small portion of it, I'll bet.